Hi everyone. In this video, we're going to talk about configuring your Coiled resources. There are many ways to ask for hardware on the cloud, and we'll walk through some of the ways you can do that with Coiled, both some common choices and some best practices. So most of our examples start with create a Coiled cluster, ask for some number of machines, get a client, and then start doing some task work. But there's lots of things that we can place in here that will change how we the kind of cluster that we get. You can actually see that Coiled has made some default choices for us. It created this cluster in US East 1, which is the default region for this account. It chose instance types of type M6I extra large, the sort of middle of the road Intel hardware extra large instance type. And we can change that. Many people like using Coiled because of the freedom it gives them in selecting precisely the right hardware for their computation. That can have some pretty significant performance and cost effects. So let's go take a look at the Coiled cluster constructor, and we'll see some common and useful options. Things like the number of CPU cores on every worker, or the amount of memory per worker, or also, if you want to, the exact VM type we want to use. There's lots of options here. I'm just going to go through a few of them that I use fairly frequently. So maybe instead of a worker 20 workers, I want 20 workers is fine, but we'll ask for maybe 4 CPUs per machine. And maybe we've got a workload that needs a lot of memory. So we've got, I think by default, Amazon instances have about 4 gigabytes per core. It's about 16 gigabytes. But maybe we have a workload where we actually want more memory per core. And so we might choose something like this. Or we might choose something, like this, right? We can ask for actually much larger machines. And Amazon will try to find us a machine specification that gets close to that. Some other things we might try. I like ARM instances. The Graviton chips on Amazon tend to be a bit cheaper and a bit higher performance, which is fun. And there's many other sort of fun configurations here. Alternatively, what you can try is instead of sort of specifying things in terms of CPU cores and memory, you can also just specify the VM type exactly. If you happen to know Amazon or GCP instance types, like let's say you want the M7G for Graviton, the ARM chip, and the 2X large, you can also specify things very precisely in sort of the nomenclature of the cloud, if you want to do that also. Some users aren't as familiar with those instance types, which is why we provide things like worker CPU equals 4, for example. Some other common configuration things that I really like the compute purchase option keyword. This is selecting between on-demand and spot. So these instances are cheaper, but they can go away. I actually really like the spot with fallback option. I use this pretty much by default all the time. If you're asking for a lot of workers, let's say 500 workers, there may not be that many spot instances in the cloud right now. Maybe there's only 400. Spot with fallback grabs those 400, but feels the freedom to get another 100 on-demand instances. It's a good compromise. It's usually pretty cheap, and I honestly don't notice the difference between this and on-demand most of the time. So there's lots of other options here. I'm going to move on though, and we'll talk about some things you can do with your cluster. So let's make some space. One thing you can do is you can scale your cluster up or down. So I've got 20 machines now. I could ask for 40 machines. My cluster is going to grow. It'll take us about a minute. A minute is about how long the cloud takes to respond, but a minute we'll have those machines. We also scale down to 4 or 5 if we want to reduce costs during that time. Another sort of fun thing to do is there's adaptivity. So I can ask for a minimum of, let's say, 10 machines and a maximum of, say, 100. And then Coiled will try to dynamically shape the size of the cluster to the workload that you have going on right now. It'll wait about a minute to make sure that everything is fine. Again, like a minute-long response time is kind of what you should expect. But this can be really helpful, usually to scale down. Some people leave the cluster running for a long time while it's just idling, and that's costly. You can explicitly shut down your cluster if you want to. I'm not going to do that here because then my demo goes away. But if you want to be very explicit about shutting things down, it's an option. Coiled will also shut down your cluster by default when you shut down after about 20 minutes of inactivity. Another sort of fun option that I really like to do is I'll do shutdown on close equals false. So I can, for example, close my notebook or restart my notebook and my cluster will persist for some time. And then I like to name my cluster. Maybe I'll call it play. And that way, if I come back to this notebook in the next minute or so, the next 5 minutes, the same cluster will survive. So I don't have to keep that, sort of that 2-minute long startup time doesn't exist. Other fun things to play with, there's things like idle shutdown or idle timeouts. And you can set an idle timeout to 1 hour or 1 minute or whatever you like here, just to make sure that things will get cleaned up in a timely way. Those are a few options and a few configuration settings. As I said, there's many, many more we didn't go over. But this hopefully gives you the sense for the kind of sort of easy things you can do, like specifying the size of a worker node, or the more precise things you can do, like VM types. Coiled allows you to create cloud resources in any region of any instance type in your Amazon or GCP accounts. So it's pretty flexible. You can do kind of whatever you want to. We are a pass-through to the cloud. There's lots of fun things in here. There's environment variables, there's tags, there's lots of fun things. But I'll let you explore the rest on your own. Maybe the last thing I'll mention is you can learn about your cluster by clicking on the cluster's details tab. And there's some information here. There's logs. If I had done any work, we would have seen some work, but I can see, looks like I started up. I'll bet this is my new workers showing up. I can see what's happening there. I can also see the infrastructure that happened. So we can see the lifetime of my cluster. I had 20 machines. Then I scaled up. We saw the scale up time. This is sort of the ramp in between me asking for them and them showing up. And I can, investigate lots of things. I can see the region, etc. So fun thing to play with. Coiled tries to be pretty configurable. Our users tend to span between people who want kind of easy things, people who want very precise things. Coiled allows people to match that evolution. So thanks for your time. Hopefully this is helpful.